and really a special delight to be at a conference whose title is Blueprint Peace. We don't hear much about peace in this world, strangely enough, other than on the Judge's show, and from the Ron Paul Institute. Today, I was looking at all of the banner headlines about the failure yesterday in Alaska. The failure because we didn't launch World War III, because the two presidents had a good meeting together, because they announced progress. This is taken as failure in our media, which of course is hawkish by the moment and manipulated by, controlled by, paid by, or simply aligned with the military-industrial complex in the country. So it's extraordinarily hard to hear a word about peace in this country. It's not so complicated, actually, to end these conflicts. It's a little surprising how long it takes and how hard it is to accomplish this, but it's not so hard in substance, because the underlying reasons for the conflicts that the United States is in perpetually are not sound reasons from the point of view of America's interests, from the point of view of our security, from the point of view of our well-being or our economy. All of the conflicts that we are in and those that we could get in are misguided, misdirected, provoked by us to a very large extent, and solvable. That's the basic point. It really is not so complicated. I think the wisest words which we repeat, and Dan just started us with, that we've heard in the 80 years since the end of World War II were those in President Eisenhower's farewell address on January 17, 1961. And I'll just repeat them because they summarize all that has come to pass. He said, "In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." This is a man who knew what he was talking about. As the Supreme Allied Commander and as President of the United States, and I might add as President of Columbia University, his most important job, he knew what he was talking about. And he was reporting to us a reality that existed already in January 1961. That reality almost led to the end of the world, actually, just a year and a half later in the Cuban Missile Crisis. President Kennedy experienced the full, nearly catastrophic weight of the military-industrial complex at that time, because President Kennedy had followed the overwhelming advice of absolutely almost every advisor in that ex-com that was famously preserved for history through its reportings of the days of that crisis. We would not be here today. And I think people know, or you should know, that even after Kennedy and Khrushchev resolved the crisis through a kind of genius of decency and humanity against the advice of all of their military advisors, we nearly had the world end anyway because of a disabled Soviet submarine that was out of communication. And when it began, it was a crisis, and when it began to surface, some jackass in the U.S. military dropping live hand grenades as a joke rather than depth charges. They thought they were under attack. and it happened to be the one submarine in the squadron that had nuclear-tipped torpedoes, and they were entered into the bay, and a man named Mr. Arkhipov, who was senior to captain, countermanded the order and saved the world, only to go back home, by the way, and be reprimanded and live in obscurity, but literally the man who saved the world saved the world within 1 second, because U.S. doctrine at the time was that any attack by a nuclear or atomic weapon would be met by the full force of the U.S. nuclear armaments, and the estimation at the time was 700 million dead across the Soviet Union, China, Eastern Europe, but good reason to believe that all of humanity might have perished. And we came within a second of that.